net zero by 2050. What actually is net zero? By 2050, the amount of greenhouse gas emissions produced by the UK is to be equal to or less than the emissions removed by the UK from the environment, i.e. by forestry, mainly is what removes CO2. So therefore, net emissions to be zero or less. So that's what net zero by 2050 actually means. But it isn't just a target, because it's actually legally binding commitment that the government's made, and there's legislation that binds the government to achieve this. Now, some stats. Heating for homes and workplaces makes up almost a third of all the UK carbon emissions. So that's a very big chunk. 2/3 of the energy consumption in commercial buildings is used for building services such as heating, lighting, ventilation, and cooling. 30% of energy in buildings is currently being wasted. And 80% of the buildings we have today will still be with us in 2050. Which means you don't have to be a genius to work out that there's an awful lot of existing buildings that are going to have an awful lot of work done to them if we're going to achieve net zero by 2050. It's one thing to build new buildings to new standards, which is happening obviously, but what about the 80% of buildings that are already built? Now, if you think that 2050 sounds a long way away, this graph is called Pathway to 2037. And you can see it starts in 2020, so we're already well into this path. And I want you to look at the orange band in the middle. Over on the left, you can see it goes between the 200 and 300 on the left axis. That is heat and buildings, that's called. So that's the energy consumption of buildings. And what you'll see is you look across from left to right, that orange band almost completely disappears over the next 5 to 10 years. So by the time you get 10 years out, it's almost gone. So this is the government have produced this. This is their pathway. So that's what they're planning on, is to almost remove carbon emissions from the buildings slice over the next 10 years. So it's very much more present and immediate than some far-off target. At the end of last year, the government commissioned an independent review of the net zero by 2050 plan. They wanted to look at it in the light of the Ukraine war and energy costs and inflation and everything else. And that review reported in January this year, and this is some of the things that they concluded from that review. That net zero is the economic opportunity of the 21st century and could be worth 1 trillion to UK businesses by 2030. So again, that's in the next 7 years. This is going to be happening. There's going to be a lot of money being spent to achieve these targets. The review also said that the need for further action is clear. So it praised what the government's done so far, but said it's not on track to deliver on its commitments. And the latest progress report shows risks across most sectors. So in other words, all those targets that the government set on that graph I just showed you, they're basically behind on pretty much every single one of them. What that means is, of course, that the government is going to get more and more authoritative and urgent in driving this. So we're going to see even more legislation. We've already seen the building regulations changes coming through. We're going to see more of that, because the government is going to have to move from expecting people to comply voluntarily to forcing them to comply. And just one example of that, you'll have seen this EPC for buildings. In April, the government changed a law which prevents landlords from renting out offices that have an energy performance certificate of less than a D. So E or below is now against the law for a landlord to rent out an office. So that's 2030, you've got to be D or above. And they've stated their intention that it's going to be a C by 2027 and a B by 2030. Now, there's not many existing buildings that are currently level C and almost none that are currently level B. So again, there's a lot of work to be done. But you can see what the government's doing by saying to landlords, so they're targeting particularly the big companies like British Land, who've got these massive estates, and they're saying to them, you are not going to be allowed to let out your office space unless you get it to this point. So they're forcing people to comply. So how does all this affect us, the blinds industry? A little brain teaser for you. Can anyone tell me what is the connection between coat pegs, a notice board, and a blind? And if you say to me very little, I'd agree with you. Anybody want to? Mr. Whistler. You got it. So this is the connection. Those of you who are regularly tendering for jobs, I'm sure are familiar with NBS, National Building Specification, and I'm sure you regularly receive tender inquiries from builders with an extract of the NBS specification, and blinds will always be found under section N10, fixtures and fittings. Blinds are normally N10 240, and if you look above and below, you'll find that they are specified alongside things like coat pegs, notice boards, mirrors, shelving, storage units. Am I right? Yeah? So the view of the NBS, and bearing in mind that most construction projects, both new and refurbs, are specified using the NBS, the view of the NBS is that blinds are accessories, functional accessories that you screw to the wall of the building after it's finished, like coat pegs. They're there to do a job, and they're just part of the fixtures and fittings. That's the view of the industry. And that's a challenge for us, because it's disregarding the fact that actually control of the sun, heat and light from the sun, is a massive part of the environmental controls, which are all specified in some other section of the NBS, along with HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. But the two things are not being joined up. So that's a challenge for us as an industry. Now, there is a standard, or there was a standard, called BS EN 15232, Energy Performance of Buildings, Impact of Building Automation Controls and Building Management. Now, this is a standard, not a law, but it's a standard that shows you, if you want to have the most energy efficient building, these are the things, this is the standard, these are the things that you should do. The interesting thing is that this is nothing to do with the blinds industry. This has been produced originally by the European Union. And these are the kind of savings that they say can be achieved. Now, what they've done is they've classified into energy efficiency classes A, B, C, and D. So they've taken the standard and they've said, well, if you're at this standard, you'd be at efficiency class, whatever, A, B, C, or D. They're saying that BACS, so that stands for Building Automation and Control Systems, standard BACS is level C, they're saying, and then non-energy efficient BACS is level D. Now, if you look at the thermal energy efficiency for an office, what they're saying there is that compared to level C, if you move to level B, you can make a saving of 20%. If you move to level A, you could make a saving of 30%. But if you're at D level, which I would suggest an awful lot of existing buildings would be in this country, the savings you could make if you move from D to B, you've got a saving there of 70% potentially, or 80% if you got to level A, which is the highest performance of efficiency. Go over to the right-hand columns with the electrical energy efficiency. Again, you've got savings from, if you go from C to B, a saving of 7%, or from C to A, a saving of 13%. But if you're already at D, then those savings could be 23%. So that just gives you an idea of this is, as I say, completely independent standard that's been produced, and this is what they're saying, that if buildings can reach these levels of efficiency, there are some big savings that they can be making on their energy consumption, and therefore both cost and carbon footprint. So 15232, I said, was a standard because in September last year it became ISO 52120. So nothing much changed, but ISO is an international standard. So if anything, it gives it more clout, more credibility. The EN standard has been superseded by this ISO 52120. So where it gets interesting is that Table 6 is the function list and assignment to the efficiency classes. So basically, Table 6 is a massive long table within the standard that lists out all the different functions of a building automation control system. So, you know, everything you can think of, from your thermostats, your heating, your lighting, your ventilation, your air conditioning, lots and lots of different functions. And then it categorizes within each category. It's got different levels of functionality, and each level of functionality is categorized either A, B, C, or D, depending on whether it's non-efficient, baseline efficient, more efficient, or high performance. And blind control is in that list, you'll be pleased to hear. And the 4 levels of functionality they've got is manual operation, motorized with manual control, i.e. it's got a motor, but you still have to press a button. Somebody has to press a switch or a button to make it go, so it has to be manually actuated. The next level is motorized with automatic control. So this is where the blinds can respond automatically to daylight levels, temperature levels, preferably both, but it's still a standalone blind control. It's not integrated with any other controls, it's just blinds automation on its own. And then the 4th level is where you've got combined light, blind, and HVAC controls. So it's a fully integrated control system where the different systems are talking to each other and working in harmony. Now, what's different about the ISO standard is that they've split residential and non-residential. That didn't used to be in the old standard. They've now split residential and non-residential. And so this is what they say for residential. This is what it used to say across the board. But for residential, they're saying that it's D, so non-efficient if it's manual operation. It's a C if it's motorized with manual control. It's a B if it's automatic control, and it's an A if it's fully integrated. It kind of makes sense. The interesting change with the ISO standard is that for non-residential, it's this. So what they're saying is that even to achieve C level, so basic level of energy efficiency, your blind control should be automated. If it's manual operated blinds or motorized blinds with manual actuation, they're saying that's a D. They're saying that's non-efficient. Which, to us, we already know that. But it's interesting that this has now been put into this ISO standard, that is a non-efficient way, because you're totally relying on human input. And, I mean, humans aren't the most reliable. Apart from anything else, they have holidays. They're not necessarily there all the time to operate the blinds, depending on the weather and the temperature and everything else. So what they're saying is to get to baseline, you need to have at least a standalone blinds automation, or to get to the more efficient classes of B or A, you need to have it integrated and combined with the other controls, which is why we're here today. This is what we're talking about today. So what I would say is, we as an industry have a responsibility, I would actually say a duty, to challenge the status quo. I think there's questions that we could and should be asking. Instead of just taking the inquiries we're given, and somebody comes along and says, I want a bunch of manual operated roller blinds in this office that we're refurbishing, I think we should be just asking questions. We should be saying, is there automatic lighting control on this project? Increasingly, the answer to that question is yes. Increasingly, there's much more awareness of automatic lighting control based on presence detection and or based on lux levels. So the lights will dim or switch off if there's enough daylight coming in. It's called daylight harvesting. People are aware of this. It is getting specified. So question 1, is there automatic lighting control on this project? If the answer to that is yes, then my follow-up question would be, put it in your own words, but how are the blinds going to be controlled to make sure that they work with the lighting automation and maximize the efficiency of it? And if the answer to that is, well, we're just having manual blinds, well, then you're likely to end up with this expensive lighting automation system being compromised. So the question then would be, how are you going to make sure that blinds... The other answer you'll sometimes get is, oh, we're not doing blinds. It's not in our package. That's the tenant fit out. So regardless of that, regardless of when blinds are going to be fitted and by whom, my question would be, how are you going to make sure that at some point blinds are installed that they're not going to actually work against your lighting automation and the energy savings are just not going to be realized? Another interesting change that is happening as a result of the net zero targets is that whereas it was okay for architects, building engineers, designers to come up with the theoretical performance, so they'd model a building and say, well, this is the theoretical energy performance of this building. It's going to save this much energy. It's only going to use this much energy. And then nobody ever, the building was built and people moved in and nobody ever questioned it. What's going to be coming increasingly is monitoring and measuring. And people are going to be able to know exactly what's using what in terms of energy. And again, that's going to be mandated by the government. And so it's no longer going to be good enough to just model it in theory and say, this is what we think it's going to be. They're going to actually have to measure what it is in practice. So if they've installed a lighting system that they're saying is going to save this much energy, and then they go and stick manual blinds in that mean that that lighting system is no longer doing its job, that's going to get flagged up. It's going to get measured. And they're going to say, well, where's the savings? The answer is, well, you should have integrated your blinds with your lights. How can you do daylight harvesting with lighting if you're not doing daylight harvesting with blinds? So to summarize, net zero is creating urgent and increasing pressure to improve the energy efficiency of both existing and new buildings in the near term. This is not in the future, this is now. And there's a generally low awareness and perception across the industry about the importance of blind control and automation. It's not top of people's agendas. So therefore, we need to be stepping up our efforts as an industry at every opportunity to challenge, to question, to educate, to enlighten, to get this more awareness of these solutions. Now, we're going to be going into quite a lot of detail about the how this is done today. And what I would say to you is don't worry if some of it's over your head. The point is, we just want you to go away from here with the confidence to have these conversations with people. You don't have to know all the answers. You can just say, I know a man who does. That's what we're here for. That's what Somfy are here for. But we do need to have the confidence to be talking to people and saying, look, have you thought about this? What about the blind control? What about the lighting control integration? We need to step up our efforts in that regard. Which brings me to briefly introduce Umbra to you. I think most of you already know us, so I don't need to spend long on this. It's clear to see the name Umbra and the connection with blinds, blackout and shade. Our vision to be a brand of choice for premium window treatments and a go-to company for motorization and integration. So that's why we've got an event like this. We want to be the first name on people's lips when you have that conversation and someone says, I need to integrate blinds with this particular building management system that I've got. Umbra. We're the place to go. The power of and, what does that actually mean? It's about what we do and how we do it. So in terms of the what we do, it's how we bring together hardware and fabrics, or as it says there, textiles and technology. So Somfy produce fantastic motors and controls, but they don't produce finished blinds. There's fabric manufacturers that produce great technical fabrics, but they don't produce finished blinds. The two things obviously have to go together in order to deliver the results. So that's the and the circle. The circle is the finished product. So we bring those things together into a finished product. So that's the what we do. We are independent, so we draw on multiple different providers in order to create that best solution for the client. And the how we do it is working in partnership and collaboration. Again, that's what this event is all about. It's about collaboration, working with our supply partners like Somfy, working with our dealers like yourselves. We can't do this on our own, but working together in collaboration, we can. So that's what the power of and is all about. Why do people partner with Umbra? We're a British manufacturer, been going for nearly 50 years. We are a carbon neutral manufacturer. we are a third generation family business. Grab a chair, Jeremy, if you're free. So yeah, business started by my father, as I said, nearly 50 years ago. Now into the third generation. And over that time, there's a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge built up, including the fact that we did used to do installation previously. So we bring that knowledge with us of what it's actually like to be on site and the challenges that you have. These are pictures taken from our academy, which is the training and the knowledge that we share with our dealers. Again, it's all about giving you the confidence to tackle these projects and the backup. And speaking of backup, service and support is the last pillar. We have a lot of capacity here. We've got in-house powder coating, for example, so we control as much of the production process in-house as we can, which enables us to be very flexible, to be able to do the lead times that you need. We've got a lot of space, so plenty of capacity to meet the demands. So that's very briefly who we are, what we're about, and the context for why we're doing this event and why it matters. And I'm going to hand on now to Elliot, who's going to introduce Somfy projects to us. Thanks, Elliot.
Thank you, Nigel. And again, I want to echo thanks to everyone that's taken time out of busy schedules to come and listen to us talk today. Hopefully you'll take some really key information away that you can use to help promote automation and also promote your business moving forward. I'm going to talk briefly about Somfy projects. Some of you in the room will know a bit about us. Some of you will know a lot about us. Some of you even worked for us in the past. So what are we looking to do? Well, our vision and our goal is to inspire a better way of living and working for all. And when we're looking at projects, we look at three key things specifically. So the first is buildings for people. So how can we help create buildings that are better for people to work, to live, to socialise in? What is the energy consumption in the buildings? Nigel spoke a lot about that, something that we are seeing come up so much more in our day-to-day jobs now, and it's really important. We feel we're at quite a critical tipping point where maybe 5 years ago it was a tick box, and now it's something that's really important, and we see a big focus on that. And the third is creating sustainable buildings. Some of you might be aware of the term greenwashing. What we're tending to see now is that people are asking really in-depth questions about the product, about what it would do, how it contributes to sustainability. I was reading a study last week from Deloitte that we're looking at the newest generation into the workplace. And one of the most important factors was that the companies they were joining had a focus on sustainability and actually a proper policy of what that can do for the building that they're going to go and work in. So it's an important topic that people are paying more attention to. So what does that actually look like for us? So when we talk about buildings for people, we're looking at helping create the optimal conditions. You'll see later on in terms of the product types, how that links in, but supporting the other services that are there in the building. Nigel talked about it, and we see it time and time again that shading is often just forgotten about. You'll have a state-of-the-art lighting, heating, cooling, yet your natural free resource isn't being managed properly. So we're challenging that and helping support create those environments. I guarantee everyone here is sat in an office space that is either too hot or too cold, and it's trying to get that message across, which is really important. We want to help remove unwanted solar glare. We hear that obviously a lot, and that's something that is a big challenge for us, and it's about taking that as a challenge but turning it into something positive. Yes, we want to promote natural light into our buildings because we know there's great benefits from it. This is a byproduct of it. How do we support to remove that? And the third is connectivity. So technology moves on, and as an industry we need to be moving on with technology. So having things on smartphones, being connected to other systems. A lot of the offices that we see today, people can do everything from their smartphone, whether that's booking a coffee, booking a yoga at lunch. I'm not necessarily saying that we should give them control on their blinds, but we should be aware that the connectivity piece is really important for the occupants of that building. And that could be as simple as looking at the facilities team. So they have a level of control that allows them to provide that for their tenants. The second is the energy consumption, and when Ben talks a bit more about our approach at specification, very early design level, this message will come through. The correct management of solar gain. So how do we ensure that we manage that? And that's probably one of the most important things that we do and try and advise on other services. So the overuse of heating and cooling. And we've seen it on many projects we've worked on where if the blinds aren't optimized correctly, work in conjunction with the other systems, it has a negative effect on the building. And it's important to be able to pass that knowledge on when we're looking at new projects. And again, connectivity. So you'll see later about the different types of control options and systems. A smart blind system obviously is an evolvement from a manual system, but where it's really important is when it's connected to the other services in that building. As Nigel put it perfectly, that daylight harvesting, it's being part of that core infrastructure that will get the most benefits in terms of results for the building. And finally, sustainable buildings. So I focus on reducing carbon. It's a big one, and it was interesting, Nigel, about asking the question about net zero, something that we're still learning, still getting our head around. There's a lot of data out there, a lot of different data as well that we're seeing. But there has to be a focus on reducing carbon. At Somfy, we've got an Act for Green, which is a start. We're not there. It's a long journey. But looking at how are our products made, and we're getting asked these questions now, needing to be in a position where we can tell you the transportation of that product from components to how it gets to on site, what the carbon footprint of that is, and what the strategies are to reduce that. As again, our control systems, blind control systems can help that, can reduce that carbon of a building. It's a work in progress. We're not where we want to be on that, but something that we see being so important in the next 5 to 10 years. Education is the second thing that we try to do, to try and help educate the market, right from top level stakeholders, so someone looking after a big portfolio to someone in a corporation such as a Barclays Group, right the way down to people that are out there every day like yourselves, selling projects and jobs. And you'll see a bit more in a minute on the team of how we can do that. And connectivity, you'll notice that's come through on each of the slides. The connectivity here probably is more around providing real-time data. We're getting closer to the point where we can provide that tangible data pre and post project, and that's really important because if I'm going to do an investment in this sort of system, what am I getting back out of it? Give me that data. And what we are seeing now is that we're being questioned a lot more on that. Give me actual statistics. I want to know what the reduction is in my cooling and heating strategy. And that's going to be ever so important, certainly in the near, probably next 1 to 2 years. And I think within 5 years' time, that's going to be pretty much standard on projects that we work on. So, what are we trying to do and how are we doing it? So as I mentioned, education's absolutely key. We, as a big manufacturer of the industry, we see it as our opportunity to put something back into the industry and help take the journey so that you guys can pick up better projects and win better work. So education is predominantly through design and specification. Ben's going to talk to you a bit more about how we do that in a moment. Support the market. And that's during the sales process. I'm going to talk a bit about the wonderful team that we have at Somfy Projects. And that's really flexible. For some companies, it's a lot hands-on work, which we can do. For others, it's a bit here and there, or it might be providing early information. But having that full cycle, right from concept to delivery, is something that we really pride ourselves on. And then the project delivery. So, as I just mentioned, we've got people that look at stuff right from concept to on-site commissioning, and that differs across each customer. So, what are our objectives as a projects division? So, we want to create growth opportunities for our clients. There's a lot of manual products out there in the market. It's moving towards more motorization. hopefully more automation. We want to create those opportunities. Writing good specifications that can be delivered, that support everything I've just spoken about, but ultimately giving the opportunities for those in the industry that are pushing the message to deliver on these projects. We're really passionate about developing the skills of our teams internally. That's a really big one for me, because if we can do that well, that helps the first one, and that's improving knowledges. It's looking at accreditations for people in the team to help wider, so not just in shading, but how can we impact legislation, etc., moving forward. We like the partnership approach of doing business. We see real value in that when we can have open and honest conversations and help get the best end result. As an industry, I think it's something we're doing better now, but yeah, there's lots of good opportunities out there, and having that partnership approach works really well. And also having a bit of fun. It's really important for us. We spend a lot of time at work, right? And yeah, we want to enjoy what we're doing. And that's something that we always make sure we check on each other that we are actually having it. We don't really dance like that, by the way, if that happens. So what sort of projects do we work on? And I wanted to share this slide. I think it's actually probably one of the most important ones that I'll talk about. And that's that you can use automation on any size of building. I think typically you see the far right-hand side, and people always think automation's on massive scale projects. And yes, there is good value on there, but equally on smaller size projects and medium-sized projects, there is opportunity. So it's not just for the great big projects that we're looking at, it's actually right across project size. And then onto the team. So Nigel talked very kindly about our products earlier. There's some great products that we do, that other people do in the industry and controls. There's some great products out there. Where I see our big difference at Somfy is the team, is the expertise. We're maybe slightly different to other manufacturers. We have quite a large team and quite forward thinking, we like to think, and we're out there actively pushing the message. So we've got Ben, who Ben's going to talk to you in a moment. So Ben's looking at specifications, very early concept projects. Some of you will know Ben was at Waverley previously. It was a very difficult recruit. Two years I lost over that one. But Ben's been on board 6 weeks. We've got Matt. So some of you will know Matt. Matt looks at things from a sales perspective. So you might have a project to talk to us, and Matt will work through that process with you. Again, Matt has an industry background from KD, Brighter Blinds. And that's the sales side. Liam Duffy, who some of you would have dealt with, looks at our projects. So if that's a project that we're doing installation on, or maybe just supply and commissioning, Liam will be that person post-sale. Really interesting, and this is very key in our recruitment for these three people, whether they had shading experience. They've sat in the seats that you guys have sat on, and we wanted that because we understand the pain points that happen in projects. We understand the challenges, certainly around, I want to reduce the package, or looking at VE options and etc. So we can help shape that for you guys. On the delivery side, we've got Brian, who's here today. Brian's been with Somfy almost 10 years, more? About 8. He's getting to 10. What Brian doesn't know about our systems is not worth knowing. Installation and also commissioning. And then you see Michael as well between Brian and Liam, who's on-site installation. And then on the far side, we've got KNX team, which is led by Jeremy. And we've made some developments over the last few years, where we've seen that type of system become more prominent in the marketplace. And actually our need there is to have more guys that can deliver projects, because we do get quite busy on that side of the business. And then you'll see an installation team. So we have some guys that are contracted that work on installations for us. I guess in summary, it's the flexibility. Some customers will use us on a project and want us to help deliver everything right from the installation. Others just want the technical support early in the sales side. But we are here, we're on the ground, we're in the UK, and ready to help deliver projects for you. And an absolute expert team there. It makes my job a lot easier, and actually gives us something to get up and deliver, because these guys are excellent, as you'll see today, hopefully. And that's pretty much us as Somfy Projects. So I'll hand you to Harry, who's going to take you through Umbra.
Okay, thanks Elliot. Thanks for that run through. So what I wanted to cover off briefly is the product range. Some of you will be very familiar. Hopefully there's some interesting things to be learnt out of it. So our roller blind range starts with Evolve. So Evolve is one of our newest products. And ultimately, the goal of Evolve is replacing Helios. So we look at Helios as being perhaps a bit of an outgoing product, but that is still a product that we are supporting for the foreseeable future, because there's a lot of projects out there with Helios blinds in. Evolve Zero, some of you will have seen that being launched. So this is our new technology, letting us make extra wide blinds. We can go up to 5 meters wide on a 44mm tube. And again, that system is compatible with most of the Somfy motors. And then Sirius, which has been around for a long time, is our standard small to medium size roller blind system. CuroLock is a key product for us. And in terms of blackout blinds, in terms of fully framed or fully cassetted blinds, CuroLock kind of sits at as the main product in that range. Extra Lock is one that I find that not many people have come across. Extra Lock was designed as a corrosion-resistant product, so it was designed specifically for a swimming pool project and has become a mainstream product for us. So it's got an independent C4 corrosion rating, so fantastic for either private or public leisure centres, pools, any indoor environment that is very corrosive or potentially very damaging to a product like that. And the important thing with it is that we can actually offer a 3-year warranty with it, which if you were to put a standard roller blind with a steel or aluminium tube and maybe some steel components into an environment like that, there's no way that it could be guaranteed. It would deteriorate very, very quickly. And then Curo is a bit of a legacy blackout product. Still a fully framed blind, but not non-zipped. It's still a popular product for some of the more budget applications, but has definitely, in the main, been superseded by CuroLock, the zipped edge product. Moving on to roof blinds. So we have the CuroLock Twin RL, so that's where you have fabric coming from both directions, closing to a center point. You have the standard CuroLock RL, which is fabric coming all the way across from one end. And then you have the Helios RL, which is a non-cassetted, no side channel roof blind system. So CuroLock Twin and CuroLock Standard RL both have a full cassette and zip side channels. The Helios doesn't have either, it just has a fascia covering the roller blind to make it look tidy from directly beneath. All of those products again are compatible with a wide range of Somfy motors. We don't support manual operation with those. It's something that I know sometimes crops up, and when it does, we generally have the conversation around how heavy it'd be to operate, how long it'd take you to operate it, and then that leads in nicely into the conversation. Okay, you can't get wiring there, then we have a battery solution for those products as well. So again, that's a Somfy Oximo battery motor with a solar panel and an external battery pack. Relatively new, I should say, compared to some of our other products. Again, it's a motorized Roman blind headrail, again compatible with most of the Somfy motors. And then finally we have Flow, which is our curtain track system, which again is the Somfy curtain track and motor systems, who are supporting both the Glide Air and the Mover Light range of motors. And within those you have all of your control options. You have your RTS, your WT, your RS485, your dry contact, and again you have battery versions of both Glide Air and Mover Light. So that's the product range in a nutshell that's compatible with Somfy. And I should just speak briefly about the motors. Really, Justin, this really is your baby, but this is I want to kind of talk about it from an impartial view. So I'm not, no disrespect, guys, we're not tied to Somfy, but I think the important thing that I take from this slide, which is a Somfy slide, is the master of sound quality. Because as you're here, if you go out into the academy and you have a play around with some of the blinds and the different types of motors that we've got out there, although Somfy is probably not the quietest, it probably does have one of the nicer sound qualities. And you'll see what I mean when you go and have a play around with them, when you hear them side by side, fitted in the same environment to the same substrate. And then finally, the actual motor range itself. So battery motors, some of you will have seen the launch of the new Sonus 40 battery motor, so quite a key one for us, especially with Evolve Zero. To go up to 5 meters wide, we can now use a Sonus 40 wire-free motor, so we could do a 5 meter wide blind with a battery motor, so great for retrofit. That motor has a fantastic battery life. It has a much bigger battery than any of the other wire-free motors in the range. You then obviously have the 24 volt Sonus 30s, and you have the mains voltage Sonus 40s and Sonus 50s. And today, the main motors we'll be focusing on are the RS485 motors and the WT motors. As we said at the start, RTS entirely, absolutely has its place, both in residential and commercial, but that was really our last event. This event is about what we can do with controls and wired controls specifically. So, with that, I will hand over to Ben.
Okay, so morning, and just want to really echo Elliot's and Nigel's thoughts. Really appreciate you all being here today. It's good to see such a great turnout, and thanks for sparing us the time from your busy schedules. So, for those who don't know me, my name is Ben Vels. I'm the newly appointed specification manager at Somfy. I have been working within the industry for 18 years, which makes me feel quite old. But predominantly my role has been with specification, working with architects, designers, engineers and some contractors as well. And I've been brought onto the Somfy projects team to help drive the specification arm. I think it's fair to say that in the last 5 years or so, Somfy's been a little bit more reactive than proactive when it comes to specification. And I'm very much here to try and change that dynamic. So in terms of actually why we're doing this, we have realised that there is a genuine, real requirement for Somfy solutions going forward. So there is a relentless talk about net zero, the relentless talks around energy savings, the new Part L, the new Part O legislations are really driving what Somfy are going to be doing in the future. So does anybody know, and I'm sure a lot of people do, but does anybody know about the new Part O legislation at all? Show of hands. Okay. So essentially, this is applying to the domestic or residential sectors where they're talking about overheating mitigation, and that very, very much falls into what Somfy do. It's all about stopping that solar gain. There are obviously other added benefits, but our primary focus is to really stop buildings from overheating. So for the domestic market, now this is any building or structure where you'll have people sleeping within that structure, with the exception of hospitality, so hotels are exempt from this. But for the domestic market, student accommodation and so on, there are now guidelines, legislative guidelines about the types of products that you can use for overheating mitigation. So there's building overhangs, something Somfy can't control, that's obviously a design feature. But they talk now about exterior shading, exterior shutters and building awnings. Very, very much falling into what Somfy can help with in terms of that motor drive system and the controls behind it. So there's a real requirement for our solutions going forward. And I think one of the other reasons why I've been brought on board, and one of the reasons why we're really making a push for education in the market, is to actually demystify some of the misconceptions around building automation. There's a lot of misconceptions in terms of it's too expensive, it's too cable heavy, it doesn't do much for the building, and we are here to address that and actually challenge that. And in turn, if we are successful, and I've got no doubt that we will be, We are here to create industry growth for people in this room. That is what it's all about, creating more opportunities for the industry, creating higher value projects, and in turn, creating specifications that are actually harder to break, especially when it's supported by data and evidence as to why automation needs to stay in the building and should be specified and should be installed. And we are working on multiple case studies, we're working on more data and evidence to support that and to support the industry. And in terms of how we're doing it, so the early engagement, the conversations with key stakeholders in the supply chain and project process is absolutely crucial. And I like to feel that we can add some value to the project. We can improve the overall building performance, very, very critical, reduce energy consumption, reduce operational costs, but also talk around achieving and helping with those compliance-driven projects. So we already have documentation in place to show where Somfy automated solutions would contribute towards LEED credits, towards the WELL standard credits. We're working on some BREEAM documents as well and other compliance-driven certifications. So we are here to help and actually give you guys that information as well. So a little bit of clarity on my specification role. There's been some rumours, there's been some murmurs about what it is that I'm actually here to do and how I'm going to be doing it. So my focus is purely to work with architects, consultants, some end users and developers to help them understand the benefits of automations for their buildings. How we're going to do it, so for sure we're going to be utilising existing relationships, forming new relationships, but for me, and Elliot's already touched on this, the education piece is absolutely critical, it's crucial. So getting out there, doing the CPDs, conducting and hosting thought leadership talks, having case studies, having more data and evidence to support the benefits of automation for the industry, crucially important. But ultimately, and I've said this a couple of times in Somfy internal meetings, we are being proactive. This is not going to work unless we are proactive. We have to be out there, we have to be engaging with clients, having these difficult conversations around why automation needs to be specified and used in lieu of a manual blind system. And in terms of where we're doing it, so it's going to be quite a diverse range of projects that we're going to be looking at. And the reason for that, in my opinion, is that the overheating problem is not specific to the commercial office space. Yes, we want to talk about the wonderful 22 Bishopsgate and the larger commercial office projects. However, the overheating issue is not specific just to the office sector. There is a huge focus, as I've just said, with the Part O legislation around stopping overheating in residential buildings. So we will be looking at other sectors, not just the commercial office space. So in terms of how we're going to help you guys and help the people in the room, so for sure we have that technical support and technical ability that we can deliver. We can help you with the wiring diagrams, the drawings, the specification advice and consultation. But ultimately for me, as the guy that is new to Somfy, and historically I've not really used a lot of Somfy solutions, it's always been my background using other solutions. We're here to help you find the right solution, and as the new guy, it can be quite overwhelming in terms of the multitude of products that Somfy actually have and control solutions available. So more importantly, we are here to help you find the right control solution for the right project based on project size, scalability, functionality, and so on. And that's really, really important. And in turn, we can support you with that case studies, with the data and evidence as to why automation should be specified for a building. We can help you with the building modeling. We can help you with the education for you guys, but also for your clients as well, to obtain key buy-ins from the stakeholders involved in the project. And ultimately, I like to think that our collaboration, our input and our support helps you guys win. In turn, we win, and that's a great scenario for all of us here. But there is, just over the back there is a big hairy-ass elephant that we need to address. The elephant in the room for me is we need to shift away from manual blind solutions. It goes completely against what we are trying to do, stopping that overheating for the buildings, focusing on the well-being and comfort and productivity of the occupants. There are so many elements that automated shading solutions can help with. There's a few of them listed on the left-hand side, but the cold, harsh reality is that manual blinds do not provide this, and we want people to challenge that mindset, to change the dynamic as to what we're doing. And we want people to ask the right questions on the project. If you're looking at a building that is BREEAM Outstanding, for example, or LEED Platinum, and they're looking at manual blind specifications, challenge it, ask why. Make them aware that actually manual blinds is not the right solution. It's not going to provide the energy efficiency for the building. So we are looking for partners that can really echo the same message. So I want to just play you a video on, Elliot's touched on the Act for Green initiative that Somfy have. I really didn't realise before joining Somfy how committed to environmental impact that we actually are as a company, and it really pleases me because it's actually something that's personally quite important for me as well.
Improve the comfort of your home or act for the environment? You no longer need to choose. With Somfy eco-designed products, you can do both. Eco-design is an overarching reflection that engages all our staff, including designers, purchasers, engineers, project leaders, at each stage of the life cycle of a product. Today, the situation is clear. 93% of our CO2 emissions come from the manufacturing and use of our products. In 2015, Somfy launched a large-scale eco-design approach. To help you identify the products that are eco-designed, we have developed a specific Act for Green logo that guarantees a reduced impact for the environment verified by an external body, reduced power consumption in standby mode, for motors in particular, extended battery life, easy disassembly for recycling and maintenance repairs, use of raw materials that are respectful of environmental and health requirements, packaging that is free from polystyrene and PVC, using recycled and recyclable fibres. Thanks to the PEP Eco Passport that mentions CO2 emissions for each Act for Green products, we are fully transparent about our products' carbon footprint. By opting for Somfy eco-designed products, you improve the comfort of your home without changing anything to your habits, except your carbon footprint.
Okay, so just echoing the thoughts on the video. So actually something that is crucially important from my perspective is the Act for Green logos and the product environmental passports. This is really key and crucial information. We are living in a world where compliance is a key driver for a lot of projects, and we are constantly being asked for more data around the systems that we're providing in terms of what is its overall environmental impact. So having data on embodied carbon, operational carbon and full life cycle assessment information is becoming really, really important on projects. And I'm really proud that we have actually got this information in terms of that embodied carbon message. It's really, really important for projects going forward. And I think we're going to be asked for this on a lot of our systems. And this is for motors and some of our control systems. And we are looking to update this for most of the Somfy range, which is really useful information to have. To my knowledge, and feel free to correct me on this, I believe that we are the only manufacturer in terms of what we do that has this information as well. So when you are working on projects that are compliance driven, that actually need more data behind the actual embodied carbon measurements, I believe that we are the only manufacturer that has this sort of information. And crucially, is transparent about this information. Transparency is really, really key. And as I say, feel free to correct me, but I think that we are the only motor manufacturer that has this. So to summarise, I think it's fair to say that we need each other. We want to form partnerships that work for both of us. And if we can do that, we can both be successful. We can help you guys win, and in turn, we both win. And just to echo Nigel's thoughts about the future opportunities. So Nigel quite rightly said that 80% of structures, that buildings that will exist in 2050, which is our net zero target, already exist. Now 90% is estimated of that portion will need upgrading, will need to be refurbished and retrofitted to bring them up to future standards. So the opportunity out there going forward is absolutely ginormous, but we need people that are going to challenge the concept behind manual blinds to make that shift to automated blinds, do better for the buildings and do better for the people that work within the structures. Now I'm really excited about the future, and I'm really excited to hopefully work with you guys in the room as well, and I'm looking forward to doing some great work together and forming some great partnerships too. Feel free to come and see me throughout the day with any questions around what we're doing in terms of strategy, and I hope to work with you guys in the future. That's everything from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben, and morning, everyone. Good to see your passion for proactivity, because that really ties in with a lot of what I want to talk about in terms of our project support for you guys, the dealers. So I just wanted to start with a quick mission, and this might look obvious and basic, and it is, but the reason I wanted to share it, so about growing demand and specification for automated shading systems. The reason I wanted to share it is because it can be and really needs to be the shared mission of everyone in this room. So I know it's obviously Somfy's mission, it is ours as well, but we need you guys essentially. We need the full supply chain to be bought into this, because of the changes that are needed that we've spoken about. It really needs everyone, and if indeed we do all buy into it, then we all benefit. Elliot and Ben have spoken about the growth opportunities, and it's impressive whenever you look into it. Dad, or more widely known as Nigel, has spoken about the economic report, the economic opportunity of the 21st century. It might sound like a hyperbole, but it is. When you look into it, you can see what that means. Just yesterday I was doing some more research, and I found 2 or 3 companies that have sprung up since the net zero thing, or have either new companies or have pivoted almost entirely to this as a consultancy, and they're knocking on 1,000 employees. The growth of this market is staggering, and the opportunity is there for us. And the traditional contractors, the traditional big players, are having to pivot. Perhaps they're used to traditionally winning on the lowest bid, but now they're having to talk about and prove their deliverability on these net zero targets. So the opportunity is there, and as we've said, it's more than an opportunity, it's a duty for us to be aligned with this, and that needs all of us. So breaking down that mission a bit more, what can we achieve, and this is how we approach the projects that we are privileged enough to get a say in on the specification, and it should be what we're all striving to do. So the first thing is to get shading specified early. That is obviously a key point, as we've talked about. It's challenging the status quo. We cannot create an intelligent enough system when we're left to the end of a project. It has to get in there at an early stage. And upselling, this is a very key point, because as we've said, we can't be reactive. People will very rarely ask you for the kind of automation that we're specifying, just because the benefits aren't widely known. So we have to be challenging what we're getting asked for, as a number of the previous presenters have been saying. So there's that upselling is very key. And adding value as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be pounds and pence. It doesn't necessarily have to be significant extra investment. It can be what's already specified, but just you can perhaps, sometimes we see people want motorization, they see the benefits of motorization, but it might be just switch control. They don't know the automation that's available to them, or they might have automation and they might have a standalone system and then a separate BMS. They don't know they can link the two together. So it's really about exploring what's there, wider than what we've been asked to do, and really, again, challenging, pushing, asking these questions. Relationships with new stakeholders. This is where, stepping into the motorization and automation world, you start to open up more doors with perhaps contacts that we haven't traditionally, as an industry, been talking to. So especially M&E consultants and M&E contractors, very key stakeholders in in what we're talking about today. So I just thought I'd pop up some pictures of projects that we've been building specifications on over the last few months and years. And the pointed thing about all of these is that we've got full automation specified, but we weren't asked for it in any of them. So it's really just to prove the point on, we get a foot in the door, but then you have to start challenging and asking the questions. They were all going for motorized, but manual switch control. So once you make the pitch, it's an easy conversation to have. And yeah, we're now specified as a full automation system each of those projects. So how can we help you in this journey? Joint pitches, project meetings, so project specific things we can back you up. Specification support, if you have an inquiry, if you have details, then we can support you in terms of what to specify. Added credibility, this is something that we've seen increasingly, especially in the economic climate at the moment, where a lot of concerns with contractors and subcontractors going under. For contractors to know you've got someone behind you as the manufacturer, we've seen that as bringing quite a lot of value to a few projects. CPD content and delivery, so the kind of content that we're delivering to specify as architects, we're more than happy to share that with you and deliver it as a joint session or book it in ourselves. We're happy to support you with this. Fabric choice and data, I just wanted to touch on this briefly. Dad's already spoken about the bringing together automation and fabric. That's what we're about. Obviously Somfy can bring huge value from the control side, but when we add that fabric data as well, we can really create a powerful overall solution. So I just wanted to pull up a few example slides from CPDs that we've got, just to very briefly show you the kind of pitch that we're doing. There's a lot of different points we can present, but I'll just pull out a few key ones quickly. So a lot of this we've already touched on, but really taking it at that top level for, we might be used to it, we talk about it a lot, but a lot of specifiers you talk to don't necessarily understand how blinds can reduce your energy consumption. So it's really about those three key things: reducing overheating, reducing heat loss, and maximizing natural light. And then talking about some of the numbers that we have around this. A lot of these we've already touched on. 40% of total UK energy consumption being used by buildings, 80% of buildings today still standing in 2050, so showing the importance of retrofitting solutions for reducing energy consumption. And the third point often makes people sit up and listen: 10% of total world electricity consumption is used for air conditioning. So I often take it back to that slide, those three things, just one of those, reducing overheating, using less cooling energy, accounts for 10% of global electricity consumption. So we're talking significant drivers. There's an investigation I often refer to by the NEF, National Energy Foundation, that took real-life case studies and extensive building modelling, that kind of thing, and they were looking at this is solar shading as a whole. So it's not necessarily just blinds, but the principle of what we're trying to do, those three pillars that I talked about at the beginning of reducing overheating, heat loss, and maximising natural light. Those three things still apply. The significance of them is probably less with just blinds rather than hard facade elements and that kind of thing, but essentially what we're trying to do is just make people sit up and listen. So they found that what was possible was a 46% reduction in CO2 emissions, 48% reduction in running costs, and then they also shared the specific case study that they'd done for the New York Times building. They had proved a 24% total energy saving, 50% saving in heating costs, and 56% saving in lighting costs. So again, this isn't just blinds, this is facade elements as well, but it really just, the mood in the room always changes. You can talk about the principles all we like, but when you throw these numbers up here, people really do sit up and listen, and very few people realise that this is the kind of potential that there is. And I just put one slide on there as to the fabric data, so G values, U values, the numbers that architects are using for building modelling a lot. Just some examples around, you see the top line is the standard double glazed window, and you see as it goes down the reduction in G values and U values of the different fabrics. So that's another thing that's it's far less theoretical than the last slide I showed. It's really showing these people how much impact we can have with internal shading. So that is all I've got to say. And yeah, do you want to talk about that?
Good. Thank you to everybody for those presentations. A couple of thoughts that have come to me as sitting there. One is, we often say this, but it's worth repeating it again, that the focus often, when we're first approached on these projects and asked for specification assistance, the focus is often on the fabric. So the architect has either specified or asked for fabric that has a certain, as Brendan said, G value or G tot, or they ask for a reflectivity percentage, so reflectance of 70% plus or something of visible light, because they're trying to reduce glare. But the question to ask at that point is, fine, we can provide you all that data, we've got some excellent high performance fabrics, but how are you going to ensure that that fabric is in the right place at the right time? Because if you can't, you might as well not bother. You'd actually get better outcomes, you get better results if you put toilet paper at the window and automated it than if you put high-performing fabric at the window and left it to manual control. So that's one key point. And the other one has just escaped me now. It's come back. Cost. So this all sounds very expensive, yes. Well, not really in the context of what we're talking about. So when we're talking about buildings that are going to have to be retrofitted to massively improve their energy efficiency from where they are now, landlords, like I mentioned British Land earlier as one example, they're going to be spending multi-millions of pounds on their estates. They're going to have to be complete new heating systems, possibly new facades with higher levels of insulation. So in that context, actually an automated blind system as a retrofit is relatively low cost compared to some of the other interventions that they're going to have to do, and actually is relatively high impact. So we as an industry, we need to get away from this almost feeling bad about putting forward automation because it's expensive. In the context of the whole building and the savings that can potentially be made, it's actually a relatively low investment with a high return and a short payback period.
Can I just check in that? Do you want to share that little story you told me?
Have you got a roving mic or not?
Yeah, so
I don't know if this is working. Yeah.
We're working with a large contractor, and they come to us and ask for a quote, and the importance was that it met the spec and they got it quickly. So we put the quote together, and we didn't really have much time to get our prices in order, but we put the quote in, and when we followed it up, the comment that was made, well, if we get it, you'll get it, and we're not really bothered about price because blinds are such a small part of the overall project. We just want the blinds to do the job that they say they're going to do and go in quickly and when you say they will. So there are contractors out there that will beat you down on price, but there's also some out there that want to meet spec, and it is not a huge part of their overall budget.
What was the rough value of
that quote that we put in was 315,000. So they didn't bat an eyelid.
For them, it was just a drop in the bucket.
Yeah. They're working on 20-30 million pound projects, even upwards of that as well.
Does anybody have any questions they want to put to any of our presenters so far? Or any other pearls of wisdom to share?
It's not a question. You could share that, all those stats with us, because I think
we will
for
share these
marketing
slides
purposes would be fantastically useful. Thanks.
Yeah, we'll share these slides with you after the event.
I could also just add that I was on a project or at site earlier this week. It was just a relatively small London office, 20 blinds. But the requirement from the landlord was energy monitoring. So they were letting, I think, 4 or 5 floors, and they wanted the blinds integrated with the lighting and the heating, because they were getting an annual report on energy usage per floor. And that, for them, was one of the key drivers for having motorised and automated blinds. It was only 20 blinds, but it was enough to swing the balance. I mean, in terms of value, it was actually quite a high value project for 20 blinds. I think blinds, the actual blinds and controls trade price was around the sort of £25,000 mark. But again, no questions asked. It was doing what they wanted it to do and monitoring the energy usage.
I think we're going to see a lot. We're going to see more and more of that. The ability to be able to prove the benefits, the monitoring and the measuring. I think it's also important, just picking up on the terminology that Harry used, that we as an industry are clear when we're using these terminologies that motorised blind is not automated, it's just motorised. An automated blind is something that can automatically be actuated without human input according to the weather conditions or the light temperature levels, etc. And then integrated is something else again. So it's both, you could have both automated and then integrated, which is you might say the holy grail of a fully integrated system with all the other building services working in harmony to create maximum efficiency.
And that's one of the other things that Brendan and myself can help with, and the guys at Somfy as well, is actually building out a specification of exactly what those blinds do. So that was again important for this project I was talking about. For example, what happens when someone overrides with a local switch? When does it reset? When does the automation kick back in? What does the automation actually do? And we're actually putting in a touch panel that's going to let the user, or let the client or the tenant actually change the lux sensitivity. So if they find the blinds are coming down too soon, they can adjust it, or the other way around. If they're not coming down soon enough for their liking and they find it's getting too bright too quickly,
so
they can adjust the sensitivity just from a simple touch panel on the wall. So again, we can help with sort of building out what that actually looks like in real life.
To have a bit of a play around with some of the kit on 2 of the systems predominantly that I'm going to take you through today. I appreciate there's a lot of knowledge. There's probably a lot of content in this presentation as well, so I'll try and take it as smoothly as possible so you can take away what the key parts are, but please don't feel too overwhelmed. There'll be some of you will know some of this, some of you will know none of it. But yeah, I'll take you through and you'll have a chance to have a look at how it's made up later, have a play around with the kit, think about questions at potential troubleshooting ones for on site, and then you can pepper Brian and Jeremy with those later on this afternoon. So, I'm going to talk around 3 systems. The first is our IB Plus system, which I think most of you in the room will be aware of. That's behind you, which you can see the little touch panel if everyone looks behind. It's a really good, what we'd describe as an entry point system. It's got good scalability, as you can see there, in terms of motors and in terms of zones. And from a connectivity point of view, it's BACnet compatible, so it can connect into a BMS system if that's what's required on the project. And Brian's going to take you through the practical side of that later on today. Second system is our Alimeo IP system, which is an RS485 system. This is based around the Somfy digital network. So the big difference here is the motor type. So you go from a WT motor on the IB Plus to an RS485 motor on the IP system. And there's obviously some nuances which you'll see in a minute in terms of the zoning and the way that system can be controlled from a front-end, head-end perspective. Also BACnet compatible. And then finally, the KNX side, which Jeremy's going to kindly deliver the presentation on later. And he'll go into more detail about the types of functionality available on that system. So to start with, our IB Plus system. What you can see here is the head end that you'll get to have a look at later. Aesthetically, it's really nice. So from a design perspective, we see that as a big opportunity and a big win. It's got good functionality, which we'll see in a minute, but it's also quite simple to understand, which I think is really important when we are looking at transitioning people from, say, just motorised or manual blinds into automation. So in terms of the architecture of what it looks like, so you can see there at the bottom the screen, which is the head end of the touch buco that I was just talking about. That can be put in a riser, or some clients like to have it on show. As I said, aesthetically it looks quite nice. That talks to the weather station, which you can see at the top of the building. And obviously the power of the weather station is it's collecting real-time data. Depending on the product type, that could be looking at lux levels. If you've got external product, you've got your wind, your rain, even snow for awnings, which we sometimes do obviously get in this country. And that feeds direct information very simply back to that touch buco. And the touch buco then sends out a communication to the field controllers, which in Somfy language we call MOCOs, which you guys will be aware of, and again you'll see later. So what are some of the benefits? It's a fairly easy installation, which you'll see later. You have different switch options. This is something that we see a lot of actually requested for. So you've got the option to have RTS switches, which is great from a refurbishment perspective, or often clients just don't know where they want the switches. So it has that functionality. You don't have to have hardwired switches. You've got the weather station, which I mentioned about, and that's obviously really key from that automation piece in terms of controlling based on the environmental situation and conditions, which, as we know, are ever-changing day to day and seasonal based as well. It's a fairly cost-effective option. I mentioned it as sort of an entry point system, and where I maybe see it as a good entry is also if you've been selling, say, just MOCOs, it's a good add-on. And again, it's asking that client the question, well, okay, you want to control it this way, but have you thought about this? Or have you thought about that? Even if that is just, you put it in and it's future-proofing the building, once it's in, if it's in at base build as well, then they've got that option to use it. It's got security and comfort features available, which Brian will take you through later. You can have fire alarm input, something we're asked about quite a bit. Timer functions, so it might be that the client wants the blinds to drop at 5 o'clock when the office shuts, or up at 9 o'clock, and you can program in different types of function, different types of timers, depending on what the client requires. We've got the sun tracking function, which again is really key to an automated system, because we know the sun moves around the building in the day, will affect the facades differently at different times of the day. And as I mentioned earlier, it can go back into a BMS, which is a feature we added maybe a couple of years ago. Really important when we're talking about that automation piece. Yes, it's smart on its own as a system, but when you bring it in to that collective piece, it adds a lot more benefit. And you've got two different types. So you can have a 4-zone or an 8-zone. And a zone is obviously what you want it to be. So it could be if you've got four facades, you would go for a 4-zone. Again, flexibility depending on what you require. So then looking into the products that are made up of this system. So the MOCOs, I'd imagine, are quite a commonly known product here in the room today. If it isn't, you're going to get the chance to open one up later and have a play around. So I won't go into too much details, but you can see there it drives 4 motors in very simple terms. And as I mentioned earlier, you can have the module, which is the RTS module, which sits in the MOCO and allows you to control the blinds via an RTS switch if that's something that's required. I would say probably when we sell this system, at the 9 times out of 10, people go RTS switching. Is that fair, Brian?
Yeah. We usually put it in or include it, even if it's not, because it just gives you that flexibility later on to add in. If someone wants to switch by that door and they didn't run any cables, fine. We'll just put RTS switching.
And then moving that out, this just obviously shows you an example of what it would look like when you're controlling more blinds and how that's made up. And again, you'll get to have a play around with that later. It's a fairly straightforward, I would say, system. From an installation point of view, it's fairly easy to install when on site. And then the touch buco. So I've spoken quite a bit about this. I think it is a really smart bit of kit. You can see there at the bottom the various input points, so how it works in terms of the backnet capability, going back to that BMS, the bus line for the IB Plus and the sensor as well. What we try and do as well, and Ben was talking about this earlier, is provide that on a project-by-project basis. So a topology that would look at, this is what the system's made up of, which you could show to a client at a very early stage, then actually something specific for that building, so they can see, or the fitters on site can see how that's put together and connected.
Is it fair to say on that sometimes you could give access to that to like the FM company or maintenance, whoever?
Yeah,
Like even for like locking out, you want to have all the blinds open for window cleaning or maintenance?
Yeah, exactly that. So it has different security functions available, which I'll let Brian take you through later, and that can have different levels of priority. So again, it's very client dependent. We see some of them installed on the floor plate, which allows anyone to control. A lot of the time it's put in a facilities cupboard or a riser for the facilities team, and often they'll be the ones that control it. And I guess it is project and client dependent on how much control they want to allow the users of the space to have. We always say, if they're worried about how the people in the building are going to control it, to have the override switches. So then the staff have always got that opportunity as well to use. And I'll come on to talk a bit about some interesting uses of it in a minute when we look at some of the projects. So like everything, there is some rules, and the rules are in terms of what you can put on the system, in terms of making sure it's compatible. Really important one is the sensor bus line. You can see that on there in terms of maximum distances. The number of MOCOs that can be put on a line. If you do have more, it has the option to have a repeater that then allows you to have more product on that line. What I would say with these documentations is they're available for anyone who wants them. I know Brian's got some booklets as well later to give out on sort of on-site installation side, but we've got all this. This is a free resource for you guys to have, because appreciate it's a lot of information, but when your client asks if you can refer to it, you can go, okay, well, yes, that's doable. We don't typically, I would say, have any challenges with the maximums here, to be perfectly honest. We haven't seen that as a major challenge. And then looking at the weather station as well. So what you can do is you can have multiple touch bucos. So the building that you saw a couple of slides back, it's a project we did in Cork, which had multi-tenanted building over 10 floors. So facilities had a master buco, if you like, to control the whole building. So what Harry was saying about things like maintenance or lockups, or they want to control a specific floor plate, but then the tenants had a buco on each of their floors to allow them to have control of the blinds on that. So there is that possibility as well if required. And then you can see the maximum in terms of the amount of bucos you can have. So where's it been used? Well, we've had some really interesting case studies on this. These ones aren't actually going to come up, but I will mention it. So we've done how many projects now, Brian, with bats? 3 projects, where controlling the light levels for bats has been really important. It sounds quite funny, but it's come up time and time again. And the functionality of a simple system like this can ensure those timers are correct. Or if you're looking at rejecting light, so in a built-up area, if you're facing residential, etc., that key thing, such as a timer function, makes sure that, do you know what, the facilities person didn't forget to go around and roll down every single blind, and the complaints from the neighbours are not there. This is a really interesting case study, which is the Blizzard building. So it's a university site in London. We worked with a carbon consultant on this job who was drafted in to look at how they made cost reductions. We had an existing system in the building, but they upgraded it to the touch buco with the back net to then start getting the proper data back. And I think the study, it was done by Trend, who are a BMS provider, was around an 80 to 90% saving on the lighting by that connection, by the simple connection. And the crazy thing about this one is they went, oh, we didn't know you could do that. Second one was the job I've just spoken about, actually, which is a project in Ireland. And again, it was multi-tenanted. So interestingly, we worked with the client there at base build, and they put all the infrastructure in at base build, which then allowed the tenants to come in. Tenants then would obviously procure the blinds they wanted on that specification, but the base build controls were in already. Really nice project. Probably one of the nicest ones actually I've seen where we've implemented the touch buco solution. And that summarizes on that system for you guys. I think have a play around later with it, try and understand it a bit more, and if you've got any of those questions when you play around with the kit, speak to Brian. He's got very vast knowledge on this system, as has Darren. But it's in all seriousness, how we describe it is a good entry system that has lots of functionality, and it's one of those things that over time you learn more about it, and hopefully can put it to good use in the marketplace as well. So, moving on to the IP system. So, as I said earlier, the big shift here is you're going from a WT motor to an intelligent motor. Obviously, with the intelligent motor, you can gain feedback, etc. So it's taking it to that next level of being smart. So, how does it work? You can see the typical topology there. Again, sensors really important for this system. We're probably going to say this quite a few times today, but we want to react to the conditions. The conditions are changing. We want our shading to talk and work with those changing environments and not be static. So for us, the weather station's really, really important. You can see here that it works slightly differently. So you've got a head-end buco, which is the product on the far left-hand side of the screen, and then sub-controllers, which can be used depending on number of blinds required and how you extrapolate that out. The switching options, so you've got what we call a Decaflex switch, which is quite an American style switch there. I don't know how clear the picture is, but that gives predefined preset positions. So with your other system, you might just have up and down and a mid-stop my position. You can have incremental positions on this, which is quite a nice feature to have. The switch can be refaced as well, which is really important, I think, because, if I'm being totally honest, aesthetically it's not the best, but we can rebadge that, and certainly now clients are wanting quite neat switching finishes. And what it does have as well is a web remote function. So if we get the chance later, we might be able to show you through some examples of that, but that will allow you to log on to the computer and control blinds in the given groups. So it's got unlimited zones, this system, which is probably one of the nicest features of it. So it could be that you have a zone that controls all the blinds on that facade, or it could be you have a zone that controls this office and that office, or all the offices together. You get some good reporting back as well on that, so it's color coded depending on where the blind is in position. It flashes if there's a fault. So it starts to give, I guess, the user of the building a bit more intelligence and a bit more information about what is actually happening in that given state. So system benefits. Again, fairly easy installation. and you'll see some examples in a second. As I mentioned, the motors are going to RS485, so you've got the feedback, which is important. Really good noise. Harry spoke about noise earlier. Certainly the new Sonis 40 RS485 is really quiet, which we know makes a big difference in the marketplace. Different control options, as I mentioned, so you've obviously got switching, but you can do PC, you can do tablet. We've seen it in a few hospitality situations where tablet's been really good, where they can run around and drop the blinds if it's a sporting event or a concert venue, those kind of things. So you can have that web remote on an iPad or Android device. And again, there's a range of functions, really important. Looking at projects are very specific and the demands are very different on each project. So having that wide range of functions is vitally important, because one client might be like, well, this is the most important thing, whereas that could be different to the next project you work on. So having that range and then dipping into what the client requires is a real advantage. You can see here on the screen the makeup of the Buco. There is one out there later we can show you. And again, as I mentioned, we have all this documentation. It's readily available for you guys to take, whether that's on a project by project basis, or if you want to have it and have it accessible anytime for you guys, you can have that. For us, it's good that it's quite clear, and you can put that in front of someone and they should be able to understand. I mentioned about the switches and how that they're not maybe the most aesthetically pleasing. Something like that is how you can change it up. You've probably seen those sort of switches in lighting. It's quite important, I think, to know that there are the options there. That, do you know what, if a client turns around and says, well, I want this finish, is that possible? Yes, it is. So looking then into the system and the architecture of the system. So a bit like on the IB Plus I showed you, you've got the MoCo controllers. Here we have what we call bridging adapters. And what you can see is the connections into the bridging adapters, and that follows a pattern across the building. Again, obviously it's dependent on how many products you're controlling. And the simple topology there out to the blinds. Again, there's rules, as there always is with systems. And a really key one for this, probably the most important, is that bottom one. That the 10-meter rule is really important, and we are insistent on that. What you will see if you speak to us on a project where you get the topology specifically for that project, so on the right-hand side it's got all the system requirements, so if you guys are installing, you can't go wrong. But it's important to adhere to the rules, or at least ask us a question if you are installing on site, just to make sure that it works in principle. I've spoken about the different types of web remote available. Here's some examples of what it looks like. So you've got the login screen, and you can see here on this example different types of blinds for this system, and then some of the control options, so you can run that from the PC. You can see there are different percentage positions. So it's quite neat if you've got, I guess, a facilities person who's maybe sitting in an office all day and running other stuff from a computer. It's a good opportunity to add something valuable onto their wider system. Some of the rules that are really important. I won't read them through because it will bore you, but again, this information is readily available for you, and we always say make sure follow the rules or pick up the phone and speak to one of us. As we said earlier, Brian's got 8+ years experience. Questions are always welcome, and it's never a silly question, right? Especially if it's maybe the first time you're using a product, just pick up the phone and ask. It's much better we get it right before it goes in and then there's challenges on site. So where's it being used? We do a lot in the commercial office space, so it's quite nice to see a different sector here. So this was done at Headingley Stadium. which is Leeds Rhinos and Yorkshire Cricket Club. And the key here was they really wanted to have something they could control on the iPads. So they obviously had hospitality areas, and they wanted to drop the blinds at certain times, as well as other functions that they were using. A really interesting story about how this project was won. I was actually involved in this project in a previous job, and we didn't win the job. The company who won it engaged us really early, and we sold it with them. And I think goes on to the points we were saying earlier about that engagement. The client was a bit unsure what they wanted. We helped our client, and the client delivered a really nice project. And they were the only one out of the 3 people quoting the job that involved us, which was quite interesting. Second one is Bet365 in Stoke. They use this system across their portfolio. What they like here is that they can have an overarching system, but they use the sub-controllers to divide each of the floors up. So they're reducing their potential fault, risk of fault. They also like the fact that you have got the intelligence coming back and multiple switching positions. And yeah, we've done quite a bit across their portfolio. And now I'm going to pass you to Mr. Ashton to do some KNX discussions.
Right, so Anemeo KNX is the black box system, basically. So this is where we can provide a highly scalable system that has lots of flexibility in how we can program the system and control the system. So because it's scalable, we can suit all sorts of budgets, all sorts of size. We can go from sort of high-end residential, for example, right up to huge, great buildings like 22 Bishopsgate. We've got different head-end options, switching options. We can do a lot with the weather station. A key aspect is shadow management, and we've got a very, very sophisticated shadow management solution now, which means we can have a very, very dynamic facade with the shading. Lots of remote control options, AV and BMS system integration. We touched on that earlier. One thing that they're doing in buildings now that we've got the system in, tying it tightly to the BMS and getting reporting back on tenancy usage, and showing people if they override the system and they leave the blinds open, for example, what impact that's having on the cooling and how much more they're paying for it, and then into tenant billing and so on. KNX is a communication protocol that's an open standard, basically. So we, Somfy, are not the owners of KNX. It's developed in Europe, and it's used globally. And there's over 500 manufacturers that produce hardware and solutions on the KNX platform. Some produce hundreds of products using KNX, some maybe only produce 1 or 2. And there's gateways through to all sorts of other systems. So whether it's through to BMS systems, or in the residential space and commercial spaces, systems like Crestron or Control 4, those types of solutions, all will talk to KNX. You need a product called ETS to program KNX, and normally you go through a certification program for that. So you may work with technical people inside your organisation who are KNX certified, or maybe with an external integrator. And on the products or on the projects that we work on, we're able to have that in-house. And there are some rules, as we've been talking about. Again, I won't talk to them too much detail, because I don't know how technical all you people are, but basically we tend to stick to 64 maximum products on a line. It is possible to extend that, but you have to put additional power supplies and so on in. And typically we find, because we split things up typically into floors or areas, we're nowhere near that limitation normally. 1,000 meters of the line, we've got big distances there that you can have between devices on the KNX bus line. Oh, there we go. The sort of bits of kit that you need on a KNX installation is a power supply for the bus, a KNX IP router if you're connecting it to the network. We typically backbone, we call it, the KNX installation over IP. So that means maybe, say we've got multiple floors and we've got IP routers on each floor or covering a couple of floors. Those will all be connected together on a network, and it might be a little private LAN that's just for our solution, or it might be on the building LAN. A KNX Line Master is a device that's a combined IP router and power supply, so you just put one box in. And we usually put a USB interface in as well. It's low tech, it's not networked, but it does mean that we can turn up regardless of the state of the network and connect in with a USB cable for commissioning and maintenance. So we tend to put those in by default to make sure we've got that option. We can put, topology-wise, I kind of covered it a little bit already, really, but you'd have a KNX power supply and IP interface. The products there, you've got the MoCo products sitting off the line there, and the weather station interface box as well, sitting on the KNX line. And then you just scale that up for the number of lines that you need. And as I say, typically that might be per floor, it might be multiples on one floor if it's a very, very big building and maybe you've got atriums in the middle of it and you need, cabling wise, you're splitting it up that way. It's very, very flexible on that. In terms of how the system works itself, this is quite a I don't know if it means anything to you, OSI-based network communications and so on, but it's basically a very, very robust and stable protocol. It works at a slow speed. It doesn't need to work at a high speed, but that means it's really, really reliable. So messages, when they go out on the bus, they get there. It's really, really, really reliable. And we have a lot of products that will work off that bus. So the wall-mounted and dim rail mount MoCo devices, so 4-channel 230-volt devices for standard 230-volt motors. We've got 24-volt MoCos that will work with 24-volt motors. We've got the KNX RS485 interface, which you can see on the top of that right-hand box there. So that gives us into then the RS485 motors. So you go from KNX to one of those and then up to maximum of 18 motors that will work off one of those devices. Very, very flexible. We've got the RTS receiver, so a little white box that you can see there. So that gives us access into the RTS network for wireless coverage. You can also use the wireless, the RTS card inside a MoCo. That goes onto with the KNX MoCo. That command will also be seen on the KNX bus, and you can use that for all sorts of things. So you don't have to use it for controlling an individual blind. It could be used to control a group of blinds. It could be used to control a floor, the whole building. If you've got other devices on the KNX bus, so you might be also potentially linked to, say, the lighting or to BMS devices that are also on KNX, you can use an RTS switch to control those as well. So you can use the wall switch or the RTS Telus remote. You can turn on a light. You can do a number of things all at the same time. That might be a bigger fish than you need to do just on the blinds, but it's got that flexibility. So it's highly flexible, highly scalable. You can have literally thousands of devices across a properly configured KNX network. So yes, lots and lots of flexibility. When it comes to things like other inputs, you can have not just RTS, but you can have like dry contact buttons coming in. You can use third-party switches, so you can go to other manufacturers who produce KNX switches, and these might have temperature sensing on them. They might have other control functions. So, for example, at Sky, at their office we did recently, in each of the offices they have KNX switches that have got inbuilt temperature sensors. We're integrated to the lighting on those. We're integrated to the BMS. We're sensing the temperature on those switches, sending them off to the BMS for the climate control. Lighting scenes are being recalled. We're integrated into the lighting system, as well as blind control from those switches. So it gives one switch plate. It's not all different. Oh, that's that look and feel. That's that look and feel. The old wall acne scenario. We've got all of that flexibility there, just through using a KNX switch from a third-party manufacturer. The weather station comes in, so we've used the same weather station that we use on other systems. That comes into the KNX system as well, so we can get all of those sensors, the lux sensors, the rain sensing, the wind sensing, all of that in. We've got devices that will give us solar radiation, so when we're looking at heat gain, and again, this is something Elliot touched on earlier, a lot of the solutions that we're delivering now are not purely about lux and glare. They're about heat gain. They're about managing the amount of heat coming through the facade so that the climate control is managed effectively and that you're not putting the aircon on unnecessarily. So that's a really important factor. So we've got all of that technology that's available to us and usable. So, you know, if we have all of that system together, you can see here a little topology showing us our master controller from the weather station, an RTS interface, a 485 motor controller, and all of that is linked in over the KNX network and can be utilised. And a bit more of a technical topology, but this gives you an idea that you can start to scale this up. You can start to take this and put it in a very, very big building and have a lot of capability. So far more scalable than our base Animeo IB Plus, for example, which is limited to 16 zones. We can do a lot of stuff with a KNX solution and deliver a lot of functionality in there. I've touched on the MoCo range already, but this sort of crystallises that. And the different types of MoCos there. So they look a lot like, they're basically the same form factor as the products that come in the other flavours of solutions that we have, but they're just KNX in there, just KNX enabled in there. We talked about the switches. So actually the switch on the right there is the one that I was talking about at Sky. And then the switch in the middle, I think that's probably Canary Wharf project, Bank Street, yeah, that's there. So again, you've got blinds, lights, and I can't read the other one. Oh, scene, there we go. Yes, so scene selection for lighting again. Or we are integrated on the left-hand side into our own RTS switches there to have manual overrides of the blinds in the solution. Head end, you know, we've got a lot of functionality available to us there. So we've got effectively like this is from Bishopsgate. This is effectively like the web remote. So this we're able to customise for each floor plate and give them access to each of the zones. And this is flexible where we've got fit outs going on. So we did a base build where it was just okay, you control each what we called facet of the building, and then in fit outs where you've got the curtain wall being partitioned for offices and they wanting the offices broken up and individual control in those areas, We just come along, reconfigure the system, and they get that zone control in the office. We then integrate maybe to RTS, put an RTS switch on the wall and allow manual override, but also with AV. So we've got integrations in going into things like Crestron and Cisco and other systems in the building there, so that the blinds can be controlled as part of the meeting room AV solution. And that's all very straightforward, using standard gateways that are available for us into those systems. This is another example of some summary pages that we're able to deliver, like dashboards, yeah, it's very, very flexible in that way. I think we've got JACEs and things like later on, but do you want to talk about shadow management, or shall I talk about shadow management? Okay, fine. So shadow management, this has been a little bit of a holy grail of functionality, because it's complex to do well. We've had historically some products that have enabled us to do it in a fairly, what's the word? I don't want to say clunky, but fairly simple way, based on geometry. But now we have a solution that is based on 3D modelling, which is highly accurate, because we're able to completely model the building. We're able to look at exactly where the shadow is going to be at a given point in time and decide whether then the shading needs to be active or inactive. So as an example, this is 200 George Street in Sydney. This building, you can see that we can take all of the surrounding buildings, put that into a 3D model. The yellow bits there are where each of the windows, individual windows, have been broken up and identified. And then we run a process which is highly computer intensive, where we basically model the sun across that building through 10 or 15 minute increments through the whole day, through every day of the year. So we look at each of those individual areas and look exactly where the shadow is, and we look at multiple areas on that zone and determine whether or not there's any sun hitting that part of the building. And then we can be very, very accurate about whether there's any shadow there or not. And it's a fantastically sophisticated system, but works very, very well. And it makes the building operate in a really user-friendly way, because most buildings now, particularly with heat gain, we might be dropping the blinds and operating the blinds even when it's not necessarily that bright, because in the summer you're going to get a lot of heat gain even in an overcast situation. And that's counterintuitive to how a lot of the building occupants will see the blind system working. So we want to make sure the blinds are open or raised as much as possible in those scenarios, because we don't need it. If we don't need to be down when operating, people want the natural light. They want to be able to see. In a lot of high-rise buildings in cities, people are paying for the view. So you actually don't want the blinds operating unless they absolutely have to. So it's a very sophisticated system, gives us a lot of accuracy, and works very, very well. We use a product called a JACE for this. Now, this is a JACE is from a device manufactured by a company called Tridium. It's used in all sorts of scenarios. So if you come across Trend as a BMS or Honeywell, the controllers now are basically Tridium JACEs, just with a Honeywell or Trend badge on the front. They're used in BMS situations. We use them as really intelligent logic control devices. We use them, as it says here, for marshalling. We bring signals from our shadow device, and then we take those out to other devices that will control the blinds themselves. So the great thing about using the Niagara platform is it's completely customizable for a start, and secondly, it talks to a lot of other stuff. So we can talk to BACnet, we can talk to MQTT, we can talk to Modbus, MBus, all these protocols that are used inside BMSs and building management and in other intelligent systems. So we've talked about the difference between motorized and automated and integrated. This is where we really get into the integrated piece. This is where it really comes together, because we're able to talk to and communicate intelligently with all these other systems and BMS systems. And I think, oh no, there we go. I couldn't see what it was. This is a picture, again, part of our modelling process. So this is for 22 Bishopsgate. Oh, there is a play button. Is there a play button? Oh, there we go. Yes. So this kind of illustrates what we're doing here, where the sun, we're modelling the sun path as it comes round, and you can see where those individual zones are going into shadow and coming out of shadow. So where it's blue, that's a shadow, and then where it's yellow, there's no shadow there. And you can see how that works and how accurate that is. And it gives us a very granular level of control on the facade. So we're not just saying, right, well, okay, we've seen a little bit of shadow over there, so we're going to close the whole facade, or a little bit of sun, I should say, so we're going to close the whole facade. We're able to close potentially just that window, just that treatment area over there, and then slowly bring it over. And we can incorporate that with sun tracking as well. And by sun tracking, I'm talking about where we're looking at potentially, say, how much solar ingress we might have. So, for example, when the sun's higher in the sky, say you've got a roller blind, you don't have to drop the roller blind so much necessarily. If you want to, say, just have a metre or 2 metres of ingress, depending on the height of the blind, you don't have to drop it all the way. You can keep it up. Or if it's a Venetian blind, you don't have to tilt the blind so much. You could have the slats open and still get the shading and heat gain management you require, because the sun is high. And then as the sun comes low, you may need to tilt to a steeper angle, or you may need to drop the blind down further. But we can do all of that with the software that's available to us, and at a very granular level on the facade. Right.
On that, Jeremy.
Yes.
What happens in terms of keeping it up to date, so like new buildings and stuff going?
Okay, well that's where it's a really, let's go back to this, and let's just pause this a minute, because this is quite interesting, because you'll see in the front here, you've got the big blue area. There's now a building there. Now, there's 2 steps to this process. One is where we look at the buildings overall. Another area is where we look at the individual zones. So once we've modelled a building with all the surrounding buildings, we then can very quickly, say you go into a situation where you divide up the facade, so you get a fit out and now you've got some offices, we can very quickly say, right, okay, we've gone from this 1 zone to 5 zones effectively on that facade now. That's very straightforward, very quick. That doesn't take very long. If you get a new building, all we've got to do is put that building into the 3D model here, rerun the analysis process, and you get the data. So if a new building goes up, it's a bit more time, but there's no reprogramming, because we just get the new database in, we upload the database, there you go. You haven't got to reprogram anything. And if we're doing a fit out and we're changing the number of zones on the facade, then it's a quick process from development, and all we then have to do is change our programming to then increase the number of zones, and it's done. So, and we don't need more hardware. We're not having to go, right, okay, you've got more zones, we need more hardware.
So it's future-proof.
It's future-proofed, yeah, absolutely. And it's a software process, software-driven. So it's much more flexible and future-proof than our older solution, which was based around hardware products onto which we had to do a whole load of geometrical work and punching numbers in to be able to get the shadowing, and we couldn't do things like, I mean, here with Leadenhall building, if you're familiar with that, it's shaped like that. You can't see it from that, but if you twisted Leadenhall, which is this little here, the cheese grater, it's the cheese grater because it's shaped like that. That's very hard to model using the hardware solution we had. Software, it's spot on, you know, and completely. You know, if we wanted to go down to changes every minute, we could do. It's just the amount of processing we'd have to do that is the limiting factor. So,
It's worth just flagging up that in terms of the future-proofing thing, for the first system that Elliot presented, the IB Plus, if that's gone into a building, a base build, and then they start dividing it up by putting partitions, you physically got to come in and actually rewire.
yes, you do. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Whereas with the IP system or the KNX system, it literally is drag and drop in a sense.
Yes, it's reprogramming.
Yeah.
It's reprogramming, and you know, it's only in the rare circumstances that you have to do something hardware-wise.
So it's worth having that conversation up front with the client, isn't it? So they understand
Absolutely,
that,
definitely.
Although the upfront cost might be more, actually down the track, it's going to save them a lot.
And that's particularly relevant in kind of multi-tenancy buildings. So these sorts of buildings where they're being put up with a base build that's open floor plan, and then the tenancies are being sold. The flexibility of using a KNX type solution in there is you know, really pays dividends when you've got those fit outs going on, and you don't have to go in the ceiling and do a lot of rewiring. You don't have to change a lot of stuff. You just come in on a hardware side, installation side. So it's far more cost effective in the long run.
And that is actually very key to have those conversations, because
Absolutely.
this is why a lot of the time blinds don't get specified pre-tenant. It's because of this reason it's not flexible and they don't know, like, they haven't got a clue where the tenant wants to switch it. So
Yeah.
you can make them aware that
Exactly.
that's actually massive.
The other interesting thing about that is that sometimes you might get a secondary blind solution going in. You might have your primary facade solution, which might be solar gain, and you might have a secondary solution, which is glare internally. Now, there's no reason why, in technical terms, you can't bolt that onto the KNX solution that's already there, because the KNX side is scalable. So if you wanted to do a second set of MOCOs or RS485 controllers for an internal solution, you could do that. You could put those devices in at a fit-out stage, put that secondary solution in, and yet it would be on the same net solution backbone as your base build solution, and therefore give you all the power of controlling that together intelligently and integrating with all the other building systems. So it's very, very powerful because of its scalability and flexibility. We've talked about BMS. We can get data from external BMS weather sources if we want it, or as in, we actually, in quite a few buildings, we give information from our weather station to the BMS. They want information that they haven't allowed for, so we can give that to them. We can look at the true building management there. I mentioned it earlier, where we're integrating in with the lighting, with the occupancy, heating, cooling, all of those other systems. It used to be, and I wrote a thing in a magazine ages ago about it, what I called the silo mentality, where everything was packaged, you know, sort of specified, packaged and delivered in silos. You had your BMS over here, you had your lighting here, your blinds here, your access control over here, and nobody would talk to anybody else. There was no integration going on. Everything had its own head end. Everything was completely independent. Of course, now everybody wants those systems working together. Commercially is where the issue is, because if I've sold the BMS over here to one subcontractor and I've got the blinds over here with another subcontractor, you've got commercial lines of delineation there which are hard to cross over. But with a system like KNX, it's a lot easier because of the communication that can go on between systems. And so even though I've got a commercial delineation, which you probably want to have, you don't want to start having responsibility for someone else's package or being dependent on it, but it means you can have those technical lines of communication, which means the building can then operate in a much more integrated way. And that's how a lot of now the smart building companies that are coming along and putting these sort of overarching head ends on big buildings, that's how they're working. They're coming in and they're talking to our system via BACnet or MQTT, they're talking to the BMS, BACnet MQTT, whatever it might be, and bringing those systems together. And that's what we can offer. So there's so many benefits to putting the right infrastructure in place at the start for future proofing. Tate St Ives is a KNX project that we did down in St Ives, funny enough. But this is a good example of scalability because there's literally 6 blinds there. And if you look in the foreground here, what you're looking at is roof lights on a gallery that was built into the hillside there. And so the blinds are like the horizontal blinds that basically are used to manage the amount of light coming into the gallery and stopping artwork or the pieces being damaged from light. There's only 6 motors there, and we control that with KNX because it's very, very flexible. We can put sophisticated control logic in there to manage the internal and manage the blinds based on internal and external light requirements, because that's what's needed. It's not covered by kind of out of the box solutions, so it's a custom solution. Works really well. And then you go right up to sort of our flagship in the UK really, which is 22 Bishopsgate, which is thousands of blinds across almost 60 floors, and all with shadow management and sophisticated solar control with multiple fit outs, all doing different things with dedicated custom graphics for each fit out floor, so that when people go in and operate the floor manually, they see what they're seeing their floor, those sorts of things. So yeah, highly sophisticated and flexible. So I think that is the technical bit done on the KNX side. Any questions?
I have one. In terms of user local override,
yes.
Something that
yes.
often gets asked.
Yes.
People have this thing that if the blinds are sort of controlling them, if the blinds are controlling themselves, that's bad for the staff. They've got this idea in their heads that the staff need to be able to control the blinds for themselves. And so, with all of the systems you've talked about, it's easy enough to say, well, you can have an RTS local switch pretty much wherever you want it. Mm-hmm. Is there a way of actually then measuring how much that gets used?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you can actually prove to the client over a period of time that actually the users haven't needed to override it because it's working as it's meant to.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one of the benefits we get from using the Tridium platform as part of the kind of logic control side, because any data point in there we can put a history on. So if a client wants lots and lots of data, we'll put a supervisor head end in. So basically what that means is we'll put a computer in which will basically capture all the data from whatever points we want to put histories on, and that means we can store an awful lot of data. So if you take 22 Bishopsgate now, they've got several years worth of data sitting on their server which they can look at and use for whatever purpose they want, in terms of looking and understanding how the system's being used. So we know, for example, when every switch has been pressed. We know when every blind has been requested to be deployed. We know what the solar conditions were at that time of deployment. We know how long it was deployed for. We know what the slat position was. We have all of that data available, and some of that data they already take and they already use to pull into their client billing solution. So, and the tenant billing, I should say. So, for example, there are some clients that really like to override their motors. They really like the blinds up, and it doesn't really matter how hot it gets. I've got to be frank, they don't care. They'd rather have the aircon going and see the view. But what the facilities team are able to tell them is, this is costing you this much money. This is how different your floor is to everybody else's, because you don't care about your aircon, and it's they can show them that data. They can show them the difference between when the blinds are deployed and when the blinds are not deployed. So the simple answer is yes. What, can you get that data from them? I don't know.
I think just on that point as well, it's a really good question, Nigel. And one thing that, from a client-facing perspective, that you guys will be day to day, if you are looking at a system like this, often everything is done very early in terms of how the thresholds are set. That could have been done by external consultant. You could have had involvement or not. One thing we always say to clients is you need to give it some time to bed in, and we're here to help you with that, because in practice the building is designed based on the number of people that come in. What we then find, of course, is that 200 people might have 200 different opinions, and I think it's important to acknowledge that and flag that early with your clients, that, do you know what, in the first month we might come back in and make some tweaks, and that could be changing very small things. So it could be the thresholds on the weather station, or the override lockout period, or it's being open and honest and transparent early that keeps then the client happy in terms of, okay, we're going down this route of automation. Because on the flip side, if you don't have those conversations, we've had this on some projects, the blinds are rubbish. They don't do what they're supposed to do, and normally they don't understand what their system is actually meant to be doing. So yeah, we'd always say that, always flag that early with them, and maybe set a time period. Do you know, we'll give it a month, we'll give it 2 months. We'll come back in, you check, you're happy. Is there any tweaks that we need to make? Across the building.
Yes, and that historical data is also useful when clients do say, oh, the blinds did this, and then you can go, well, this is what they actually did. And we can use that to demonstrate that perhaps the client perception is different to the reality, and that therefore either there was a misunderstanding, or maybe there's a bit more re-education that needs to be done with the client to explain how the solution is actually working. And that's particularly the case, I would say, with anything that works on solar gain. So if it's about heat gain management, it's a really difficult concept, it seems, for end users to understand, because they think that, well, it's bright, the blind should be down, and that's not always the case, in the sense of you may have low sun in the winter and you've got no solar gain. So from the performance metrics, from the consultant specification that the system has been developed to, the blinds may not need to be deployed. And it might be something that you have to talk about with the consultants and with the contractors and the client at the time when the building's been specified, to say, well, okay, you want this as a solar gain management, but there will be times when you're actually going to want glare management, and you may not get glare management through solar gain management, because the opposites, it sounds counterintuitive, but it's how physics work. It's how, if there's not enough heat from the sun, or if there's a lot of heat coming even on an overcast day, it may not be bright, but there's still the conditions for the system to operate, and the other way round. So it's, we've had to educate our clients on those projects about, we need to think about lux as well, maybe bring that into the strategy at some point, so that the building is user friendly as well as performs to the criteria that have been specified. Any other questions? Great.
Yeah.
Oh.
I always ask the crazy questions, but
Nothing's crazy.
system set up,
Yes.
building running,
Yeah.
and then you have a situation where you might find you have a storm,
Mm-hmm.
and can the system be taken out by a lightning strike or power surge?
Well,
Which-
if you don't plan for that, yes, it can. Lightning strikes can affect any aspect of technology in the building. I mean, normally, in anything commercial, there's normally lightning protection built in as part of the specification. But in terms of physical, like conductors and so on and so forth, there is always power protection. There are also bus protection devices, so you can put basically a lightning. You can put them in each panel, for example. So if you go back to, say, this drawing here. So what you're seeing there is floor lines with each of their own power supplies. Now, in those panels, you can put surge protection devices that protect the devices and also protect the bus as well. So that's the 2-wire bus that goes out to each device. So that can be protected as well. It's rare in a big commercial building that you'll ever get to that level, because the lightning protection specification will ensure that the internal systems are protected, but you can go extra, and sometimes specifications ask for it. They'll say, we want at the bus level or the panel level, we want these lightning protection devices in place. But that's how you do it.
Okay, thanks.
Does that answer the question?
It does, but in our arrangements with our business, if anything is going to go wrong, I'll be the one that's called in to sort it out. So you're faced with, you don't know what the next scenario might be.
Yeah.
But when it happens, you can't sort of walk away from it. You've got to face it and sort it.
No, sure. I don't think I've ever. I'm just trying to think if I've ever had a lightning strike takeout KNX bus. I can't think. If it has it, can you think of any, Brian? Can't think of any. No.
So we normally put the surge protection in for where the weather station is. Obviously, we normally put a power one and a bus one in anyway.
Yeah. See. Yeah. I mean, from a kind of a broader maintenance and perspective, I would say that the largest number of problems are actually at the mechanical and power end of the blind, if I'm being honest. What tends to happen is we'll get told a blind isn't running or blinds aren't running, and 9 times out of 10 that will be because the power to the blind's been turned off, or there's a mechanical issue somewhere along the line. When the next level down tends to be network, because of course we're dependent on these large installations, and even to be honest, even in say a high-end residential or a small commercial environment, you're inevitably having devices that are connected together over IP. They're connected to switches. If the network goes down, or somebody comes along and unplugs a cable out of a patch panel, or the network guys reconfigure a network switch and suddenly your device isn't on its VLAN anymore, those sorts of things are kind of the next level down, where the network for some reason is causing a comms issue. I can genuinely say that when it comes to KNX devices on the KNX bus, they are really, really robust, and we get very, very little issues with devices once they've been installed. And we're very rarely taking devices out and replacing them and putting new devices in, or finding anything like DOAs when we're pre-commissioning, or finding that a device doesn't work properly. It's really, really rare, and this is over thousands and thousands of devices that I've integrated and commissioned over the years. I can genuinely say that. That's why we use KNX. It's a really robust. Each product has to be certified against the standard and goes to Belgium to be tested. I mean, obviously not every physical device, but when a manufacturer like Somfy produces a device and says they want it certified to be KNX compliant, it gets taken to Belgium and it gets tested in their labs to make sure not only does it conform to the hardware specification and the software specification that it works, also manufacturers have to have ISO compliance and things like that. So typically the manufacturers of KNX hardware already have lots of QC processes in place that ensure their products work well. And most of them are designed for commercial, industrial usages. So they're not sort of stuff that you buy off the shelf at B&Q. They're vastly superior to kind of just.
Thank you. I hope you don't mind me asking the question.
No. I hope I can get off my soapbox now. And so yes. Anyway, I'm sure after that you are, if I get there, hungry. So good. Thank you.
I was reminded of a conversation I had a few months ago with someone who was speaking about the benefits of KNX, and somebody else said, "Oh, KNX, that's old technology. Things have moved on." And the reply was, "Yes, KNX has been around for 25, 30 years, and that's exactly why we use it, because it's been tried, tested, proven, and it works." Which I thought was a pretty good answer. I guess that was perhaps a bit mind-boggling at times. I think the key message that we want everyone to go away with today is you don't have to know all this stuff. That's what Jeremy's for, and Elliot's team, and our team. The main thing is we want to give you an idea of what's possible so that you can have conversations with the projects and clients that you're getting involved with. The simple answer to any questions you get asked about, is it possible to do X, Y, Z? Can you connect to A, B, C, whatever those questions are, the simple answer is yes. Just say yes. You don't have to know how, but just say yes. Because our team and Elliot's team, we are here to be an extension of your team to help you, like we've said, come to site with you if needs be, prepare specifications, prepare drawings. We want to work as part of your team because then we all win. You win, we win, everybody benefits. So I think that's probably the key takeaway from all of this. So really appreciate your attendance today. Appreciate Somfy, you guys, your support and the presentations you've given. Thank you very much. Can we give a little round of applause to... Conscious we're over time, so we want to let you get on your way, but we did say that somebody was going to walk out with this little bag of goodies, setting tools to help you on your way, so let's see who that's going to be. I can't even see from here. Okay, well, congratulations to Durnleys anyway. Hopefully there'll be lots of projects that they can use it on. All right, well, you're very welcome, guys, to help yourself to a coffee. We've got the travel lids for the cup, so take one for the road if you'd like to. I realise a lot of you got journeys, so if you want to get going, that's fine. If you want to stay around and chat a bit longer, that's also fine. But
get back these bags over here if anybody wants to buy one. The sample bags.
they're ready to go.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.